Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I bought my first house 3 years ago after saving up for what felt like forever. Working double shifts at the warehouse and living off ramen noodles for 2 years straight was worth it when I finally got the keys to my little two-bedroom place. Nothing fancy, but it had a decent driveway and a small garage. The driveway was one of the things that sold me on the house, because street parking in my neighborhood is a nightmare. My neighbor moved in about 8 months after I did. He seemed nice enough at first. We'd wave at each other when taking out trash or checking the mail. His house had a shorter driveway than mine, but it could still fit 2 cars if you parked right. The problem started almost immediately after he got settled in. I came home from work one Tuesday evening and found his beat-up sedan sitting right in the middle of my driveway. I figured it was just a mistake. Maybe he was confused about property lines or something. I walked over and knocked on his door. I told him that I thought he had accidentally parked in my driveway. He apologized and said he was just unloading some stuff and would move it in a sec. I waited around for about 20 minutes, but he never came out. Eventually, I had to park on the street and walk an extra block to my house. The next morning, his car was gone. A week later, same thing happened. When I knocked on his door, he barely opened it. I told him his car was in my driveway again. He said he was just grabbing something real quick and would move it in a sec. Same story. 20 minutes later, still there. I had to park on the street again. This became a pattern. At least twice a week I come home to find his car blocking my driveway. Every time I asked him to move it, he gave me the same response about it being just for a sec. But it was never just for a sec. Sometimes his car would sit there for hours. I started having to plan my evenings around whether I'd be able to park in my own driveway. The street parking situation was getting worse too because they were doing construction on the next block over, so more people were parking on our street. After about 2 months of this, I decided to be more direct. I caught him outside one Saturday morning while he was getting his mail. I told him I needed to talk about the parking situation because I couldn't keep having my driveway blocked multiple times a week. He told me to relax and said he was never there that long. I explained that he had been there for 3 hours on Wednesday, and I had to park 4 blocks away because the street was full. He said that wasn't his problem and that it was just a driveway. I reminded him that it was my driveway and that I paid the mortgage on the house. He shrugged and said he would try to be quicker about it, but nothing changed. If anything, it got worse. Now he was parking there almost every other day. I tried talking to him 3 more times over the next month, and each conversation went basically the same way. He kept insisting it was just for a second. I was getting fed up. I worked 10-hour shifts at the warehouse, and the last thing I wanted after a long day was to hunt for parking and walk half a mile to my own house. I started taking pictures every time he parked in my driveway, just in case I needed them later. I called the non-emergency police line to ask about my options. The officer I spoke with said that since it was private property, they couldn't ticket him, but I could have him towed. The towing would cost him around $200 to get his car back. I thought about it, but I didn't want to escalate things that much right away. I decided to try one more conversation. I waited until I saw him outside and walks over. I told him the parking thing had to stop and that I was asking him nicely one last time to stop using my driveway. He said he didn't know what my problem was and that he wasn't hurting anything. I explained that my problem was that I couldn't park at my own house because he kept blocking my driveway. He insisted it was literally just for a second and that I was being ridiculous. I pointed out that it was never just for a sec and that last Tuesday his car had been there from 6 in the evening until almost midnight. He said he had people over and acted like it was no big deal. I told him it was a big deal when I couldn't park at my own house. He suggested I find somewhere else to park and said it wasn't like I owned the whole street. Talking wasn't going to work. This guy had zero respect for other people's property and clearly thought he could do whatever he wanted. The next few weeks were more of the same. His car in my driveway, me knocking on his door, him giving me the same line about it being just for a sec, then leaving his car there for hours anyway. Then last Friday happened. I had been looking forward to this weekend for months. My buddy from college was getting married up in the mountains, about 3 hours away. I had Friday afternoon off work so I could drive up early and help set up for the bachelor party. I came home around 2 in the afternoon to grab my overnight bag and hit the road. And there it was. His car, sitting right in the middle of my driveway like it owned the place. I sat in my car for a minute just staring at it. I was already running a little late, and the last thing I wanted was to deal with this again. I walked over and knocked on his door, probably a little harder than I should have. I told him his car was blocking my driveway and that I needed to leave for the weekend. He said it was just for a sec because he was waiting for someone to come by. I said I needed to leave now and asked if he could please move it. He told me to just park on the street and said he would move it later. I explained that the street was full because of construction and asked why I should have to park on the street when this was my driveway. He repeated that it was just for a sec and told me to chill out. He started to close the door, but I put my hand on it. I asked him how long a sec was, because last time he said that, his car was there for 5 hours. He said he didn't know what to tell me, and that he would move it when he moved it. And then he actually closed the door in my face, just shut it, and walked away like I wasn't even there. I stood there for a moment, feeling my blood pressure rising. Then I looked at his car sitting in my driveway, and I got an idea. I walked back to my car and pulled in right behind his. Not touching it, but close enough that he definitely wasn't getting out. I turned off the engine, grabbed my overnight bag from the passenger seat, and locked up. When I was walking to my front door, I heard his door open behind me. He yelled and asked what I was doing. I told him I was just parking in my driveway and that it was just for a second. He said I couldn't block him in like that. I asked why not since he blocked me out all the time. He insisted it was different. I asked how it was different. He stammered that it was because he had somewhere to be. I said so did I, and that I had somewhere to be for the entire weekend. I could see the realization dawning on his face. He asked if I was leaving for the weekend. I confirmed that I was and told him to have a good one. I went inside, grabbed my toiletries and a few other things I had forgotten, then came back out. He was standing by his car looking panicked. He said I couldn't leave him blocked in all weekend. I told him sure I could and reminded him that he said it was just for a sec. I explained that I would be back Sunday night, which was just a sec in the grand scheme of things. He called it crazy and insisted I couldn't do this. I reminded him that I could do whatever I wanted in my own driveway. He asked what if he had an emergency. I suggested he could call someone else for a ride or walk, mentioning that walking was good exercise. I got in my friend's car who had come to pick me up since I couldn't get my car out, and we drove off. Through the back window, I could see him standing there next to his car, hands on his hips, looking absolutely furious. The weekend was amazing. The bachelor party was a blast, the wedding was beautiful, and I didn't think about my neighbor drama at all until Sunday morning, when I checked my phone. I had 17 missed calls and about a dozen text messages, all from him. The messages started Friday evening and got progressively more angry. His first message around 6 on Friday asked me what the hell I was doing and demanded I move my car. His second message around 7 said he seriously needed to get out and that this wasn't funny. His third message around 9 explained that his girlfriend was coming over and he couldn't go pick her up, demanding I move my car immediately. The messages kept coming all weekend. By Sunday they had shifted from angry to almost pleading. Sunday morning he admitted he was wrong and begged me to please move my car so he could get out. Sunday afternoon he promised he would never park in my driveway again and pleaded with me to just move my car. I didn't respond to any of them. I figured he needed some time to really think about how it felt to be stuck because of someone else's inconsiderate parking. I got home Sunday evening around 8. When I pulled up to my house, my front door flew open and he came storming out. He asked if I had any idea what kind of weekend he had. I said I hoped it was relaxing and asked if he had time to think things through. He said thinking things through wasn't the issue and that he had been trapped in his house for 3 days. I pointed out that he wasn't trapped and could have walked anywhere he wanted to go. He complained that he had plans and had to cancel everything. I said that was too bad and told him now he knew how it felt when someone's inconsiderate parking messed up his plans. I moved my car and watched him speed off without another word. He looked absolutely livid, but I felt pretty satisfied. It's been 2 weeks since then, and guess what? He hasn't parked in my driveway once, not even for a second. I've been working in finance for about 6 years now. Started right out of college at a small firm, worked my way up, and eventually landed what I thought was my dream job at a mid-sized financial services company. The pay was decent, the benefits were solid, and my direct manager was actually someone who cared about her team. What I didn't realize was that her boss, our vice president, would turn out to be one of the most entitled and clueless executives I've ever encountered. The trouble started about 8 months ago when our company decided to implement a brand new financial platform. This wasn't just a simple software update, we're talking about a complete overhaul of how we processed transactions, generated reports, and managed client data. The timeline was aggressive from day one, but upper management kept pushing for faster implementation. My manager called our team together for the initial briefing. She explained that this was going to be challenging, but we needed to make the transition as smooth as possible. The VP wanted everything up and running in 4 months. I told her that seemed really tight for something this comprehensive. She agreed but said that's what we were working with. She promised to do her best to shield us from the pressure, but we were going to need everyone to step up. And step up I did. What started as occasional late nights quickly became the norm. I was putting in 12 to 14-hour days, working most weekends, and basically living at the office. My social life disappeared, my sleep schedule was destroyed, and I could feel my mental health taking a serious hit. But I kept telling myself it would be worth it when management recognized my dedication. The platform launch was a disaster from day one. Reports weren't generating correctly, client data was getting corrupted, and our team was drowning in emergency fixes. Instead of the 4-month timeline we'd been given, we needed at least 8 months to properly implement and test everything. But did the VP acknowledge the unrealistic expectations? Of course not. 3 months into this nightmare, I was called into a meeting with the VP. I figured it was finally time for some recognition of all the extra hours I've been putting in. The VP told me he'd been reviewing the team's performance on the platform implementation, and frankly, he was disappointed. When I mentioned that we'd been working around the clock to fix the issues, he said that was exactly the problem. He criticized me for working 70 to 75 hours a week while we were still behind schedule. He said it was honestly a shame considering how much money they spent on the new platform. Then he delivered the real blow. He said that if we couldn't learn to be more efficient, artificial intelligence might just replace all of us. And by us, he made it clear he meant people who couldn't adapt to new systems quickly enough. When I asked if he was saying I wasn't working efficiently, he replied that results mattered more than hours logged. Maybe it was time to work smarter, not harder. The irony was lost on him completely. Here I was sacrificing my health and personal life to clean up the mess created by his poor planning, and he was basically calling me incompetent. That conversation was my wake-up call. I walked back to my desk, updated my calendar to block out evenings and weekends, and decided I was done being a martyr for this company. From that day forward, I worked exactly 45 hours a week, not a minute more. The change was immediate and dramatic. Within 2 weeks, the problems that had been somewhat manageable suddenly became critical issues. Reports that I used to fix during my weekend overtime sessions started piling up. The client complaints that I used to handle during my late-night hours began escalating to higher management. I shared the VP's comments with a few trusted co-workers during lunch. One of them said he couldn't believe the VP said working hard was a shame and called it insane. Another co-worker mentioned she'd been pulling 60-hour weeks herself, and maybe it was time she reconsidered that. I told them that's exactly what I did. I figured if my extra effort wasn't appreciated, why was I killing myself? Word spread quickly through our team. One by one, my co-workers started setting boundaries. The culture of unpaid overtime that the VP had created through his unrealistic expectations began to crumble. Within a month, the situation became impossible to ignore. The chief executive officer started asking questions about why so many issues were piling up. client complaints reached his desk. The VP was suddenly scrambling to explain why the platform implementation was falling apart. The VP started demanding to know why reports were 3 weeks behind. Our manager explained that the team was working at capacity and we needed more resources or a more realistic timeline. He said this was unacceptable and that we needed people who could handle the workload. Our manager respectfully pointed out that the workload wasn't sustainable, that we'd already lost one team member and others were looking for new positions. That team member who quit was our most experienced analyst. She'd been with the company for 8 years and knew our systems better than anyone. Her departure created a massive knowledge gap that couldn't be filled quickly. The VP tried to hire a replacement, but the salary range he approved was laughably low for someone with her expertise. 2 months later, the VP finally authorized hiring an additional team member, something our manager had been requesting for over a year. He also had to bring in expensive consultants to help with the platform issues that my overtime hours used to mask. During a team meeting, the VP actually seemed to realize how complex our work really was. He mentioned he'd been working with the consultants and was starting to understand that the implementation was more complicated than initially projected. Our manager pointed out that's what we'd been trying to communicate from the beginning. He brushed it off by saying hindsight was 2020 and we should focus on moving forward. No apology for his previous comments. No acknowledgement that his unrealistic expectations had created the crisis. Just a casual admission that maybe things were harder than he thought. Last week I submitted my 2 weeks notice. I found a position with better pay, reasonable hours, and management that actually understands the value of work-life balance. The VP complained that this was really inconvenient timing since we were still dealing with platform issues. I explained that I'd found an opportunity that was a better fit for my career goals. He asked what it would take to keep me and mentioned they could discuss a raise. I told him it wasn't about money, it was about working for leadership that respects their team's contributions. My manager said she hated to lose me, but completely understood my decision. The VP looked genuinely confused, like he couldn't understand why someone would leave after being treated the way he'd treated us. My last day is tomorrow, and the VP is panicking about replacing me. The new and improved system has made our jobs even more complex, not simpler like he promised. The artificial intelligence he threatened to replace us with turns out it can't handle the nuanced problem solving that our work requires. I'm starting my new job on Monday. I'm a single dad raising my son after my wife passed away. We moved to this quiet neighborhood, hoping for a fresh start. My son had been struggling with making friends at his new school, so when he finally found a group of kids who welcomed him at the local playground, I was relieved. The playground became our daily routine. I'd sit on the bench reading while he played with his new friends. Everything was going well until last Tuesday afternoon. My son and 4 other kids were playing on the jungle gym when this middle-aged guy showed up with his wife. They had their own kid with them, maybe 7 or 8 years old. The man started yelling at the children, demanding they get off the equipment because his son wanted to play there. My son looked confused and looked over at me. I was about to get up when one of the other kids spoke up politely, explaining that they were there first, and there was plenty of room for everyone to play. The man got angry. His wife just stood there with her arms crossed, nodding along with everything he said. He told the kids he didn't care who was there first, and that the bigger kids were hogging all the good spots. He ordered them to move. My son tried to be reasonable. He's always been mature for his age, probably because of everything we've been through. He suggested they could share the playground since there were swings and a slide big enough for everyone. That's when things got ugly. The man stormed over to my son and grabbed his arm roughly. He started yelling about how kids these days don't respect adults, and that when an adult tells them to do something, they should just do it. I jumped up from the bench. Nobody touches my kid like that. I shouted at him to get his hands off my son right away. The man shoved my son backward, and that's when I knew this wasn't going to end well. My son stumbled but didn't fall. The other kids started backing away, clearly scared. The man kept ranting about how my son needed to learn respect and that kids think they can mouth off to adults. I told him that my son was being perfectly polite and that he was the one who needed to learn some respect. That's when the wife finally opened her mouth. I'll call her Karen. She started screaming about how their son had just as much right to play there and that the other kids were being mean to him. I looked around. Her son was literally just standing there, not even trying to play with anything. The other kids hadn't even interacted with him. I pointed out that her son didn't even try to join in and there was plenty of room for everyone. Karen shrieked back that I shouldn't tell her what her son did or didn't do, claiming I wasn't even paying attention. The man was getting more aggressive by the minute. He stepped closer to my son again and threatened to teach him a lesson about respecting his elders. That's when my son, who had been holding back tears, finally spoke up with a shaky voice. He told the man that you can't just push kids around because you're bigger and that it wasn't right. The man completely lost it. He raised his hand like he was going to hit my son. I moved fast, getting between them, but the man was already swinging. His fist connected with my son's shoulder before I could fully block it. I said I was calling the police while pulling out my phone and keeping myself between the man and my son. The other kids had all run to their parents, who were now rushing over. Karen started screaming at me, saying I couldn't call the police on them because they didn't do anything wrong, and that my son was being disrespectful. I told her that her husband just assaulted a child, and that was a crime. The man was still trying to get around me to my son, threatening to show me what assault really looked like if I didn't get out of his way. The police station was only a few blocks away. 2 officers arrived within minutes. The first officer, a woman, took control of the situation. She told everyone to step back and calm down, then asked what was going on. I explained what happened while the man and Karen kept interrupting, shouting over me. Several other parents who had witnessed everything backed up my story. The second officer, an older man, was taking notes and looking increasingly annoyed with the couple. The older officer asked the man directly if he had put his hands on my child. The man replied that he barely touched him and that kids these days need discipline. The female officer told him that wasn't an answer and asked again if he did or did not make physical contact with the child. Karen jumped in, insisting he was just trying to teach my son some manners because the kids were being rude to their son. One of the other parents stepped forward and contradicted her story. The parent explained that they saw the whole thing and that Karen's son wasn't even trying to play, while the man just started yelling at the kids for no reason. The officers separated everyone and took individual statements. My son was shaken but handled it well, clearly explaining what happened. The man kept getting more agitated, and Karen kept shrieking about how unfair this all was. After about 20 minutes, the officers had heard enough. The older officer said that the man was under arrest for assault on a minor. The man exploded, calling the whole thing ridiculous and claiming he barely touched my son. Karen screamed that they couldn't arrest him because he didn't do anything wrong. They cuffed the man and put him in the back of one police car. Karen completely lost her mind. She was screaming at the officers, at me, at my son, at anyone who would listen. She ranted about harassment and threatened to sue everyone, claiming we were ruining their lives over nothing. The female officer told her she needed to calm down and that she could follow them to the station if she wanted to post bail for her husband. Karen yelled back that she wasn't going anywhere and that this was all our fault. She pointed at my son, who moved closer to me. I put my arm around him protectively. Karen called my son a little liar and accused him of making the whole thing up. The officer reminded her that they had multiple witnesses and that her husband had admitted to making contact with a child. Karen stormed off toward their car, still screaming. The officers finished taking our information and left with the man. About 10 minutes later, I was walking my son home, and trying to process what had just happened, we heard screeching tires behind us. Karen had been following the police car and she was driving like a maniac. She ran a red light at full speed and slammed directly into the side of the police car. The impact was so loud that people came running out of their houses. The police car spun sideways and ended up on the sidewalk, while Karen's car ended up wrapped around a light pole. My son and I ran back toward the scene along with several other people. Both officers were conscious but clearly shaken up. The man who had been arrested was unconscious in the back seat. Karen was slumped over her steering wheel, not moving. More police cars and ambulances arrived within minutes. Paramedics worked on everyone involved. I overheard one of the officers talking to his supervisor. He explained that Karen had been following them and screaming out her window, then ran the light doing at least 50 in a 30 zone. The supervisor asked if there was any idea why she did it. The officer explained that her husband was under arrest for assaulting a kid at the playground and that she was pretty worked up about it. Karen had been so focused on screaming at the police car that she didn't even see the red light. The traffic camera caught the whole thing. She ended up with a broken arm, a concussion, and charges for reckless driving, running a red light, and vehicular assault on police officers. Her husband got additional charges for his injuries being caused during the commission of a crime. He spent 3 days in the hospital before going to jail. The officers both recovered fully, though one had to wear a neck brace for a few weeks. They stopped by our house a week later to check on my son and thank us for being cooperative witnesses. Karen and her husband ended up moving away after all the legal trouble. My sister is 2 years older than me, and she's always had issues with food. When we were kids, she got bullied badly at school for her weight. Instead of our parents getting her help or teaching her healthy ways to cope, they just let her eat whatever she wanted whenever she wanted it. They said they felt bad for her and didn't want to make things worse by restricting her food. This created a problem. My sister never learned self-control around food, especially anything sweet or tasty. She would sneak food, hide food, and binge eat when she thought nobody was looking. Our parents always made excuses for her behavior and never set any real boundaries. Now she's 28 and still living at home with them, and they still do all her shopping and cooking like she's a child. I moved out at 18 and learned to take care of myself. I met my husband in college, and we've been together for 6 years now. He's nothing like my family. He's responsible, considerate, and actually thinks about what might happen before acting. When his birthday was coming up, I wanted to do something special. I planned a surprise party with all his friends and co-workers. I'm not much of a party planner, so I asked my parents if they could come over early to help me set everything up while I sent my husband out for a few hours. Here's where I made my first mistake. I told them not to bring my sister. I knew there would be food involved in the setup, including a homemade chocolate cake with cream cheese frosting that I've been planning for weeks. My husband loves homemade desserts, but tries to avoid all the preservatives and artificial ingredients in store-bought stuff. I spent a lot of time finding the perfect recipe and had planned out these elaborate decorations. But when my parents showed up at my door, guess who was with them? My sister, of course. I asked them why they brought her when I told them not to. My mom said it wasn't fair to exclude her from family events and that she wanted to help too. My dad said she promised to behave herself and told me not to make it into a big deal. I should have put my foot down right then, but I was already stressed about timing and didn't want to waste time arguing. So I let them in and tried to make the best of it. I gave my sister some simple tasks like arranging chairs and putting out napkins, basically anything that didn't involve food. I made it clear that nobody was supposed to touch any of the snacks or desserts until the guests arrived. My sister nodded and said she understood, promising she wouldn't touch anything. But I was running around trying to coordinate everything, decorating, setting up music, preparing drinks, and I couldn't watch her every second. That was my second mistake. About an hour into setup, I went into the kitchen to check on something and found my sister standing at the open fridge with the mixing bowl in her hands. The bowl that had contained all my extra cream cheese frosting. She had eaten nearly half of it with a spoon. I asked her what she was doing and she started crying. She apologized over and over, saying she was just going to taste a tiny bit to see what it was like, but then she couldn't stop herself. She swore she didn't mean to eat so much. I was furious, not just because she'd ruined my plans, but because this was exactly the kind of thing I've been trying to avoid by asking my parents not to bring her. My parents heard the commotion and came rushing in, asking what was wrong. I explained that she had eaten half the frosting I needed for the cake decorations. My mom brushed it off, saying it wasn't so bad since the cake itself was fine, and I still had enough for a basic layer. I told her I had specific decorations planned, and now there wasn't enough frosting, plus I didn't have time to make more before the party started. My dad suggested we could just run to the store and grab a container of frosting, acting like it was no big deal. I reminded him that my husband tries to avoid all those artificial ingredients, which is why I made it from scratch in the first place. My dad then suggested we just not tell my husband, claiming he wouldn't even know the difference. That's when I really lost it. The fact that they were suggesting I lie to my husband and dismissing my efforts made me see red. I told them I was serious and asked if they really thought this was acceptable. I pointed out that they brought her here after I asked them not to. She destroyed the dessert I spent hours planning, and now they were acting like it was no big deal. My mom told me I needed to back off and be more sensitive, saying it wasn't my sister's fault she had these problems. I said I was actually more angry at them than at her. At least she felt bad about what she did, while they were sitting there trying to convince me this was normal and acceptable behavior. My dad got defensive, saying it wasn't fair to blame them since they couldn't control what she did because she was an adult. He added that they were trying to help by giving me solutions. I shot back that their solutions involved lying to my husband and using store-bought garbage instead of the homemade cake I had planned. I told them they had created this whole situation by bringing her when I asked them not to. My mom accused me of being stubborn and mean, saying they were just trying to include her in family activities. The argument escalated from there. They accused me of being unsympathetic to my sister's struggles, and I pointed out that enabling her for nearly 3 decades hadn't exactly helped those struggles. Eventually, they got so offended that they packed up and left, taking my sister with them. I had to scramble to fix the cake situation. Luckily, one of my husband's friends arrived early and helped me run to 3 different stores until we found organic frosting without all the chemicals. It wasn't good like what I'd made, but it was better than nothing. The party ended up being a success despite everything. My husband had a great time and never knew about the drama, but my parents have been giving me the silent treatment for 2 weeks now. My sister did text me an apology, which I appreciated, but my parents were acting like I'm the villain in this situation. I found out from my aunt that this isn't the first time something like this has happened. My sister has ruined food at several family gatherings over the years, but everyone just covers for her and pretends it's normal. My aunt said she stopped hosting family dinners because she got tired of my sister eating half the meal before guests arrived. I feel vindicated knowing I'm not crazy, but also frustrated that my parents have created this situation and refuse to acknowledge their role in it. They've enabled her to the point where she can't even control herself around food for a few hours, then they act shocked when there are problems. The silent treatment is actually kind of a relief, to be honest. At least now I don't have to listen to them make excuses for behavior that would be unacceptable from a 5-year-old, let alone a grown woman. I'm a single mom to a 4-year-old daughter who has attention deficit hyperactivity disorder and some sensory processing challenges. Last year I started taking her to our local splash pad to help her get more comfortable with water and to work on her social skills. It's been amazing for her development. She's learned to share, take turns, and play with other kids in a way that felt impossible before. At home we have a marble reward system. Every time she follows directions, shares nicely, or manages her big emotions well, she gets a marble in her jar. When the jar gets full, she can cash in her marbles for something special. It took her 3 months to fill that jar this time, and she chose a Paw Patrol beach bucket with sky on it. She was so proud of herself and wanted to bring it to the splash pad. The splash pad is usually such a positive place. Parents bring dollar store water toys, and all the kids share everything. I've made genuine friendships there, and my daughter has learned so much about playing with others. Most parents are really good about helping kids navigate sharing and taking turns. Today started out normal. My daughter was happily filling up her new sky bucket when I noticed a boy, maybe 5 or 6 years old, grab it and run to the other side of the splash pad where his siblings were playing. My daughter came running to me, upset and confused. I figured maybe he didn't realize it belonged to someone. These things happen with little kids. I decided to walk over with my daughter and suggest they all play together with her bucket. That way, she wouldn't feel like something was being taken from her, and he wouldn't get embarrassed. My daughter asked if she could play with her bucket too. The boy started screaming and threw the bucket back at her before running away. Not exactly the outcome I was hoping for, but at least we got the bucket back. My daughter played happily for the next half hour with some other kids, and when she needed to use the restroom, she put all her toys back in our beach bag. I zipped it up so nothing would get lost while we were gone. When we came back from the restroom, our bag was no longer on my beach towel where I'd left it. Instead, it was dumped out on the other side of the splash pad, with snacks scattered everywhere. The same boy and his siblings were playing with all our water toys, and he was parading around with my daughter's sky bucket like it was his prized possession. I was angry. Someone had unzipped our bag and gone through our personal belongings. Where were this kid's parents? I looked around and didn't see anyone watching these children at all. I was ready to leave anyway, so I walked over to them. I told the kids to put away the toys because they belonged to us and we were leaving. I said we need to ask before taking things. The siblings were fine about it and started putting everything back. But when my daughter tried to get her bucket back, the boy clutched it tighter and said that it was his bucket now. I told him it was her bucket and that we were leaving, so she needed it back. He started running away again. I was done with this game. I caught up to him and pried his fingers off the bucket handle. He had such a grip on it that I actually had to work to get it free. The moment I took it, he completely melted down, face first on the splash pad, screaming, hitting his head on the foam flooring. That's when his mother finally appeared. She told me not to touch her child. I tried to explain that he had taken my daughter's bucket from our bag and we were trying to leave. She said the bucket probably cost $1 and told me to get over myself. I said I couldn't give it away because it belonged to my daughter. I started walking back to gather our things, but this woman wasn't done. She yelled across the splash pad that this was why people shouldn't bring toys if they didn't want to share them with others. Then she started trying to get other parents involved, talking loud enough for everyone to hear. She said that her son was autistic and didn't know better. She complained that her son was now a mess all over a $1 store bucket that we wouldn't let him use. She asked why we would even bring it if we didn't want it being used. I was embarrassed. Everyone was staring. I packed up our stuff and left, but I could hear her still going on about it as we walked away. When I got to my car, I just broke down crying. My daughter kept asking if she did something wrong, which made it even worse. I've been going over and over this in my head. Yes, I physically took the bucket from him, but what else was I supposed to do? Let him keep something my daughter worked 3 months to earn just because his mother couldn't be bothered to watch him? This woman tried to make me look like the villain for not accommodating her son's behavior when she wasn't even supervising him in the first place. If she wanted him to play with other kids' toys, maybe she should have been there to teach him how to ask politely instead of just taking things. My daughter has worked so hard on her impulse control and social skills. That bucket represented months of good choices and hard work. I wasn't about to teach her that none of that matters if someone else wants what you have and throws a big enough tantrum about it. The next week, I decided to go back to the splash pad. I wasn't going to let one bad experience ruin something that had been so good for my daughter. When we got there, I noticed several other parents looking at us and whispering. But then something unexpected happened. One of the moms I'd met there before came over to me. She told me she'd heard what happened last week and that the other woman was completely out of line. She said all the parents knew how hard I'd worked with my daughter and that she was always good about sharing. Several parents had witnessed the whole thing and were upset by how that mother acted. They've been talking about it all week. One of them even mentioned she'd seen the same family cause problems at other places around town. The mom told me that I shouldn't let that woman make me feel bad and that I had done the right thing. She said teaching kids boundaries was just as important as teaching them to share. My daughter ended up having a wonderful time that day, and no one tried to take her bucket. Several kids asked if they could play with it, and she was happy to share because they asked the right way. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.